Oh,
Yes.
It ends with us?
It ends with us, the #1 New York Times bestseller.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about this? What's happening with that?
I'm excited. I am.
Many of us apologize far too often for simply expressing what we want. I catch myself saying, "I'm so sorry. Thank you so much." You don't have to do that. It's a habit, especially among women who are often labeled as demanding or difficult just for speaking up. Yet, despite that, I've always been drawn to love and connection. I'm a true romantic at heart. Romance colors everything I do. Ironically, though, I had never actually read a romance novel. But what happens when the person everyone sees as perfect, a celebrity seemingly untouchable, admired for her grace, beauty, and charm, suddenly becomes the center of a controversy powerful enough to shatter that flawless image? That's exactly the situation surrounding Blake Lively. Once hailed as Hollywood's golden girl, Blake captivated audiences with her natural charisma. Magnetic on talk shows, radiant on movie sets, and effortlessly down-to-earth in interviews. Fans adored her because she seemed both glamorous and relatable. She rose to fame through an iconic teen drama, then transitioned seamlessly into film, proving her range with roles that spanned from lighthearted comedies to gripping dramas. Her social media presence added to her appeal, one day posting chic, editorial-worthy photos, the next sharing self-deprecating jokes about the chaos of family life. Her witty, viral exchanges with her husband, Ryan Reynolds, made her appear refreshingly authentic in an industry obsessed with image. Blake had mastered the balance between stardom and sincerity, dodging scandals that derailed others and maintaining an aura of effortless cool. So when rumors of on-set tension began to circulate, few people took them seriously. Hollywood thrives on gossip about creative clashes and production stress, and most assumed this was just another exaggerated story. Maybe she and her director exchanged sharp words, or maybe filming had simply become intense. Nothing unusual. But as the whispers grew louder, it became clear that this wasn't a fleeting misunderstanding. The situation spiraled into something much more serious. Leaked text messages, allegations of manipulation, legal complications, and even the quiet distancing of some of her closest allies. Suddenly, the narrative changed. Blake Lively wasn't just experiencing a difficult shoot. She was at the heart of a storm threatening to destroy the wholesome image she'd built for years. At the center of the controversy was a film that should have been a milestone in her career, a major adaptation of a beloved novel with a devoted fan base. The project was helmed by Justin Baldoni, a filmmaker celebrated for his emotionally driven stories and his focus on empathy and human connection. Known in the industry for his positive spirit and collaborative approach, Justin had built a reputation for creating art that uplifts and resonates deeply with audiences. Yet now, even that reputation was being tested as the line between art, emotion, and controversy began to blur. Pairing Justin Baldoni with Blake Lively, an actress long admired for her blend of emotional depth and glamorous screen presence, seemed, at first, like a match made in cinematic heaven. The project promised artistry, heart, and star power, a collaboration destined to produce something extraordinary. But almost from the moment cameras started rolling, quiet murmurs of discord began to surface. Initially, the whispers were subtle. Talk that Blake felt creatively constrained, her instincts and artistic impulses clashing with Justin's more structured directorial vision. Soon, however, the narrative deepened. Rumors emerged that certain on-set safety and emotional welfare protocols had not been properly upheld, particularly during scenes that required physical strain or intense emotional vulnerability. These weren't minor grievances that could be waved away. In a post-Me Too Hollywood, where accountability and ethical filmmaking have become essential, such allegations carried real weight. What began as casual crew gossip evolved into pressing questions from within the industry. Was there more happening behind the scenes than anyone realized? As the tension escalated, informal complaints reportedly turned into formal ones, and the once promising production morphed into a legal and reputational battleground. For Blake, the fallout was seismic. She had spent years crafting a public image rooted in elegance, wit, and authenticity, a woman who seemed relatable yet aspirational, untouched by the toxicity often lurking beneath Hollywood's glittering surface. Now that image was cracking. With leaks, speculation, and social media scrutiny spreading like wildfire, the public began to doubt the sincerity of her carefully curated persona. The same fans who once adored her candid humor and family-friendly charm started to wonder if it had all been an illusion. Was Blake Lively's authenticity merely another Hollywood performance? The scandal was no longer confined to one movie set or a disagreement between two professionals. It had become an existential question about Blake's identity, whether her reputation could survive the kind of implosion that had ended so many careers before hers. Amid the chaos, personal anecdotes began surfacing, blurring the line between private and public life. Blake herself recounted moments of playful banter with her husband, Ryan Reynolds, after the birth of their children, teasing exchanges that once seemed light-hearted but now carried a bittersweet undertone. In interviews, she described how a seemingly harmless joke could suddenly sting when framed against a backdrop of professional disrespect and emotional strain. According to Blake, one of the most painful aspects of her falling out with Baldoni stemmed from offhand remarks she claimed he made about her postpartum body. Comments she described as dismissive and undermining. For a woman who had long championed self-acceptance and body positivity, such treatment felt like a betrayal. It wasn't just an insult, it was a wound to her principles and her identity. Her legal team seized on that angle, releasing what they presented as corroborating evidence. Selective text message exchanges that appeared to show Justin as insensitive, detached, and at times invasive of her boundaries. Whether those snippets told the full story or merely a curated version of events became a matter of fierce public debate. But one thing was undeniable. The partnership that once promised creative brilliance had instead erupted into a cultural spectacle, exposing the fragility of reputation in the glare of modern celebrity. One particularly damaging piece of evidence appeared to come from a text exchange suggesting that Justin Baldoni had entered Blake Lively's private trailer without permission. A serious breach of professional conduct, especially on a high-profile film set. The moment that snippet hit the press, media outlets exploded with outrage. Many drew comparisons to other Hollywood controversies involving overstepped boundaries by male figures, and social media turned into a battlefield of opinions. Online threads and think pieces flooded every platform. Some condemned Justin outright, labeling him another out-of-touch Hollywood man abusing his power, while others urged restraint, reminding readers that selectively edited messages can distort reality. Still, the initial narrative overwhelmingly sided with Blake. Her established reputation for authenticity and integrity made it easy for the public to believe she was courageously speaking up against unfair treatment. But then the situation took a stunning turn. Justin's team released the complete, unedited text conversations, timestamps, full dialogues, and even the emojis that had been conveniently left out of Blake's version. The broader context flipped the story completely. Far from being dismissive or domineering, Justin appeared considerate and professional. The messages showed him consistently checking on Blake's comfort, offering to adjust shooting conditions, and repeatedly suggesting breaks if she ever felt overwhelmed or unsafe. Even the supposed trailer incident unraveled under scrutiny. The extended exchange revealed that Blake herself had, at least once, invited Justin into her trailer, a fact that sharply contradicted the narrative of him intruding without consent. What her team had presented as incriminating evidence now read as cooperative, even friendly communication. In full context, Justin's words reflected collaboration, not coercion. What once looked like callous behavior now seemed like a director working hard to accommodate his lead actress. The entire story began to collapse in real time. The once clear villain versus victim narrative had become murky, with some even suggesting it had reversed entirely. Then came the most shocking development yet. The sudden resignation of Blake's high-profile attorney, a powerhouse litigator famous for defending Hollywood's elite through even the messiest scandals. These lawyers almost never abandon cases that could enhance their prestige unless something behind the scenes becomes untenable. Though the attorney's official statement avoided direct accusations, its carefully chosen wording spoke volumes. It referenced differences in the interpretation of evidence, and irreconcilable professional boundaries, strongly implying that Blake's version of events no longer aligned with the facts that had emerged. Within hours, speculation exploded across the industry. If even her own legal team had stepped away, what did that say about the strength of her case? Overnight, the tide shifted. Journalists, fans, and industry insiders began reassessing everything: timelines, leaked files, statements, through a far more skeptical lens. Whispers grew louder that Blake might have exaggerated or, worse, misrepresented parts of her story. And perhaps most devastating of all, Hollywood itself began to turn its back. A quiet but noticeable distancing began among the elite circles that had once celebrated her. Some colleagues subtly redirected their praise toward Justin in interviews, or posted cryptic, supportive messages hinting at their allegiance. Others took quieter routes, unfollowing Blake on social media, quietly removing her from collaborations, or omitting her name from press materials. Within weeks, nearly a dozen influential figures had pivoted away from her orbit, a staggering blow for someone who had long seemed immune to Hollywood's fickle loyalties. For the first time in her career, Blake Lively, once seen as untouchable, admired, and universally beloved, found herself watching her glittering alliances crumble, her credibility questioned and her carefully built reputation dangling by a thread. And then, almost poignantly, an old story resurfaced, one that reminded fans of her early innocence. She once recalled with a nervous laugh the first time she auditioned for a role at 16. Her brother, trying to help, had written her name on a slip of paper to get her seen. When the casting director called out, "Blake," she hesitated. They didn't even have her on the official call sheet. She walked into that room anyway, terrified but determined, and gave it everything she had. It was a story once celebrated as the beginning of a fairy tale. Now, years later, it echoed with a different kind of fragility, a reminder that even the brightest stars can find themselves fighting to be believed again. One of the most surprising developments in the collapse of Blake Lively's once solid Hollywood support network came from an unexpected source, her own co-star from the very film that had ignited the controversy. This actor, who had initially praised Blake's professionalism and dedication during early press interviews, quietly shifted their stance after reportedly reviewing the full, unedited text exchanges between Blake and director Justin Baldoni. What began as vocal, public support evolved into a careful distance, suggesting that the co-star had concluded the situation stemmed more from selective editing and misunderstanding than from any clear misconduct. Equally striking was the response from a well-known singer-songwriter, the same artist who had first introduced Blake to Justin. Feeling blindsided by how events were presented publicly, the musician began to quietly side with Justin after learning more about the complete context of the messages. To those close to the situation, it felt less like a simple professional rift and more like a personal betrayal, deepening the emotional fallout surrounding Blake. Adding to the mounting pressure was the growing doubt from within Blake and Ryan Reynolds' own inner circle. A longtime friend, a frequent presence at their private dinner parties and charity galas, reportedly admitted in confidence that Blake's timeline of events didn't align with the evidence. Once all messages were reviewed, this revelation only amplified Hollywood's suspicions that not everything in Blake's story added up. Then came a rumor that sent shockwaves through the industry, whispers of an alleged secret recording, supposedly captured accidentally by one of Blake's own children. The recording, according to unverified claims, allegedly featured Blake discussing how to frame routine production issues as more serious infractions. Though no actual proof of such a recording has ever surfaced, the mere existence of the rumor electrified the Hollywood gossip circuit. In a world where reputation is everything, even the hint of manipulation or manufactured outrage can destroy credibility overnight. Producers and directors, wary of controversy, began quietly re-evaluating their willingness to work with Blake. In an industry increasingly risk-averse when it comes to public image, she was no longer seen as the safe bet she once was. And through it all, one silence grew louder than any headline, that of Ryan Reynolds. Known for his sharp humor and playful teasing of Blake on social media, Ryan had built an image of unwavering support for his wife. Yet amid this escalating scandal, he has remained conspicuously silent. Fans who expected him to step forward and defend Blake, or at least question Justin's side of the story, were met with nothing but his usual posts promoting his gin brand, soccer ventures, and comedy projects. Insiders, however, suggest this silence is not indifference, but strategy. According to reports, Ryan may have seen the same unredacted evidence or received private briefings about communications that haven't been made public. If true, it could explain his decision to stay out of the fray entirely, to protect both his reputation and, perhaps, to avoid further inflaming a narrative that already appears dangerously unstable. In Hollywood's ever-shifting landscape, where alliances can dissolve overnight and perception often eclipses truth, Blake Lively's situation now stands as a cautionary tale, not just about fame and scandal, but about how quickly admiration can turn to isolation when the story changes. It's an impossible situation for any spouse to navigate. Instinct would normally call for loyalty, a public show of unity, a declaration of support. But when the evidence behind the scenes doesn't fully align with the public narrative, speaking out becomes a risk of its own. For Ryan Reynolds, that risk isn't just personal, it's professional. His credibility, his carefully cultivated image as Hollywood's witty, grounded everyman, and even his brand partnerships could all take a hit if he defended a story that later unraveled. For Blake, Ryan's silence has become both deafening and devastating. Without his public backing, she stands more exposed than ever. Her entire career was built on a rare combination of glamour, discipline, and the kind of controversy-free reputation that made her a favorite among studios, brands, and audiences alike. But in an industry that trades on perception, that once golden image now hangs in uncertainty. Behind the scenes, multiple sources suggest that several major studios have quietly pressed pause on projects tied to Blake's name. It's not an outright blacklist, more of a cautious wait-and-see approach. Executives are reluctant to move forward until the dust from the Baldoni controversy settles. In Hollywood, optics often matter as much as performance, and right now the optics are far from favorable. The actress, once considered a symbol of grace and dependability, is now viewed as a potential liability. Hollywood studios are, above all, guided by two priorities: box office performance and brand image. A scandal, no matter how ambiguous, can cast a long shadow over both. Few executives are willing to gamble millions on a project that might be boycotted or ridiculed before its trailer even premieres. Some insiders still hope Blake's star power, her history as America's sweetheart, might outweigh the noise, but the odds appear to be slipping. The abrupt resignation of her attorney and the inconsistencies in her version of events have made that hope increasingly tenuous. Meanwhile, Justin Baldoni has approached the unfolding crisis with a calm that few expected. While many in Hollywood would have fought back with fiery public statements, subtle digs, or orchestrated media leaks, Justin has chosen a different route, one defined by restraint and transparency. His team's release of the full, unedited text exchanges, complete with timestamps, emojis, and casual back-and-forths, reframed the entire narrative. What once appeared like coldness or overstepping was revealed as thoughtfulness and professionalism. Industry observers have noted that his measured tone, emphasizing accountability and openness rather than defensiveness, has worked in his favor. The contrast couldn't be clearer. Where Blake's team seemed reactive and fractured, Justin's response projected confidence and control. In a business where reputation can shift overnight, that difference has proven pivotal. Now, as the storm rages on, the balance of perception continues to tilt. For Blake Lively, the challenge is no longer just about winning a legal or public battle. It's about reclaiming trust in an industry that rarely forgives and almost never forgets. Justin Baldoni's handling of the scandal has stood out for its composure and precision. Rather than fueling the media storm with emotional rebuttals or personal attacks, he has focused on clarity, providing consistent timelines, verifiable details, and emphasizing values like respectful collaboration and safe, positive work environments. In both formal interviews and casual conversations, he has steered attention away from the drama and back toward the purpose of the project itself. His tone has remained grounded in professionalism, reminding audiences that storytelling should uplift, not divide, and that a healthy production environment is non-negotiable. People who have worked with Justin before have echoed that sentiment, describing him as a compassionate leader who genuinely looks after his cast and crew, even under the grueling pressure of major studio productions. His steady, disciplined approach has not only steadied his image, but has also earned him unexpected allies across the industry. In a world where most celebrities in crisis turn to aggressive PR tactics and image rehabilitation campaigns, Justin's restraint has made him appear confident, transparent, and sincere, qualities Hollywood often claims to value but rarely displays. Meanwhile, fans find themselves caught in emotional turmoil. For many, the hardest part of this saga isn't just the allegations themselves, but what they seem to reveal about Blake Lively's carefully cultivated public persona. This is the woman who championed body confidence, playfully teased her husband Ryan Reynolds online, and regularly shared warm, relatable moments that made her seem both glamorous and genuine. To see that image now clouded by accusations of manipulation or exaggeration feels to some like a betrayal. The fandom has fractured. One side defends Blake fiercely, arguing that postpartum struggles are deeply personal and that any offhand or insensitive remark about her body could easily have left her feeling diminished or disrespected. They insist her reaction was human, not strategic. The other side sees things differently, pointing out that Justin's team has provided evidence that appears more complete, consistent, and contextually grounded. They question whether Blake's narrative was shaped, consciously or not, to elicit sympathy or gain leverage. The result is a gray area, a public tug-of-war where truth has become subjective and every new detail is dissected in real time. On social media, supporters of both camps wage an endless battle, analyzing interviews, timestamps, facial expressions, and emojis like detectives. The debate has shifted far beyond the facts of the case into a referendum on belief itself. Who deserves trust, and how much of what we see from celebrities is ever real? Amid this storm, the film at the heart of the controversy hangs in limbo. Adaptations of beloved novels usually arrive with built-in excitement and loyal fan enthusiasm, but here, anticipation has been replaced by gossip. Instead of discussions about the acting, direction, or how faithfully the story mirrors the book, the focus has narrowed to leaked texts, on-set behavior, and postpartum remarks. For the marketing team, it's a nightmare scenario. Even the most beautifully executed film can be strangled by negative publicity before it reaches theaters. Insiders now debate whether the studio will pivot the promotional strategy, perhaps leaning heavily on Justin Baldoni's reputation for integrity, or try to shift attention back to the novel's passionate fan base, hoping to reignite enthusiasm for the story itself rather than the scandal. As for Blake Lively, her path forward grows increasingly uncertain. One possible move would be to launch a full counteroffensive, to release additional materials or correspondence she claims will vindicate her side. But that road is fraught with risk. Every new disclosure reopens wounds, invites further scrutiny, and deepens the perception that she is fighting not for truth, but for survival. And in Hollywood, where narratives evolve faster than facts, even the strongest defense can end up fueling the fire. If the newly released evidence turns out to be weak or easily disproven, Blake Lively's credibility could erode even further. She's at a crossroads, facing three possible paths, each one fraught with risk. The first is to double down, continuing to release statements or evidence in her defense. But that move could easily backfire. One more contradiction could cement the perception that she has exaggerated her claims. The second is to step back entirely, staying silent until the controversy fades. Yet Hollywood rarely forgets, and every fresh rumor or leaked text could pull the story back into the spotlight. The third, and perhaps most difficult path, is to acknowledge misunderstandings, to adopt a conciliatory tone, rebuild trust behind the scenes, and quietly repair damaged relationships. Insiders suggest this might be her most sustainable long-term option, particularly after her lawyer's abrupt and very public departure. But it would require a level of humility and vulnerability that may clash with the meticulously curated image Blake has spent years maintaining. That leads to the question so many are asking. Why would someone so careful about her reputation take such a gamble unless she believed she could prove her claims beyond doubt? Some speculate that she genuinely felt diminished or overshadowed during production and wanted to reclaim a sense of control. Others believe deeper insecurities, amplified by postpartum struggles and the pressure to maintain a perfect public image, may have intensified her reactions. Whatever the motivation, one thing is clear: Hollywood is watching closely. In an industry where reputation is as valuable as talent, this moment could either fade quietly into obscurity or permanently reshape how Blake Lively is viewed among the A-list. Blake once reflected on the artistry of her work, describing her excitement about exploring multiple eras in a film that spanned from 1908 to the present, celebrating the changing fashion, makeup, and treatment of women over time. Ironically, that same fascination with perception and presentation now mirrors her own predicament: a woman navigating shifting narratives and evolving identities under public scrutiny. One likely explanation for her current predicament is that she underestimated the digital age's unforgiving precision. In an era where every screenshot, timestamp, and emoji can be authenticated and reassembled, half-truths rarely hold. By sharing selective snippets of her private exchanges with Justin Baldoni, Blake may have believed the public would instinctively take her side. But when Justin released the complete unedited messages, the narrative flipped overnight. What was once framed as emotional mistreatment began to look more like miscommunication, and her selective editing gave critics ammunition to question her motives. That said, Blake's perspective may still be genuinely felt, not fabricated. Comments that seemed harmless to others could have hit harder for her, especially given her postpartum vulnerability and heightened emotional state. Misunderstandings on film sets are common. Long hours, tight deadlines, and creative clashes often blur professional boundaries. But in today's social media-driven landscape, a few misinterpreted lines can